Two poor ranchers saved a young Apache woman. 20 years later, she returned with an army. The sun was beginning to dip behind the rugged hills, casting long shadows over the dusty plains. Samuel Hayes wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted at the horizon, trying to spot the last of his cattle before nightfall. His life had always been hard, but he had learned to survive with what little the land could offer. Beside him, Eli Turner, his neighbor and lifelong friend, adjusted his wide-brimmed hat and sighed. "Looks like another dry spell's coming," Eli said, his voice low. "If we don't find more water soon, the cattle won't make it through the week." Samuel nodded, his eyes still scanning the rolling terrain. He was worried, but more than that, he felt the quiet hum of the land, the way it seemed to breathe, even when everything around it was parched. Life out here was never easy, but it was honest. They had almost finished rounding up their last few cows when a sharp, desperate cry cut through the evening air. Samuel froze. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his heart skipping a beat. The sound was faint but unmistakable, someone in trouble. Eli narrowed his eyes, scanning the distant ridges. "Sounds like a girl," he said slowly. "Could be lost, or worse." Samuel didn't wait. Together they urged their horses forward, moving faster than they had in years, their boots kicking up the dry dust of the plains. The cry grew louder, more frantic, and with every passing second, Samuel's heart pounded harder. As they rounded a rocky outcrop, they saw her. A young Apache girl, barely more than a child, crouched against the side of a canyon, her dark hair tangled and her clothes torn. Around her, 3 men on horseback circled slowly, their faces hidden beneath broad hats. They were armed, and there was no mistaking the hunger for gold in their eyes. The ranchers slowed, studying the scene carefully. The girl looked terrified, and Samuel could feel the panic radiating from her like heat from the sun. Eli whispered, "Those men, they're bounty hunters. She's in serious trouble." Samuel gritted his teeth. "Then we do something. We can't just leave her." It wasn't a simple decision. Interfering could mean danger for both of them. But Samuel and Eli had learned long ago that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about doing what was right even when you were afraid. They moved closer, keeping their horses hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Samuel raised his hand slightly, signaling Eli, "We'll have to be clever. We can't take them head-on." Eli nodded, understanding immediately. They had both faced danger before, but this was different. This was life or death for someone else, and Samuel felt the weight of that responsibility pressing down on him. Using the shadows and the cover of rocks, they crept closer. The girl's eyes widened when she saw them, and for a moment Samuel feared she might bolt, or worse, scream. He slowed his approach and spoke softly. "It's okay. We're here to help. Don't be afraid." Her small frame trembled as she stared at them, unsure whether she could trust these strangers. But there was a flicker of hope in her eyes, fragile and fleeting like the last light of the sun. The men on horseback noticed something was amiss. One of them shouted, "Hey, who's there?" Samuel's pulse quickened. There was no turning back now. Eli nudged a loose rock down the slope, causing a loud clatter. The hunters spurred their horses toward the noise, momentarily distracted. Samuel and Eli took their chance. They raced down the rocky path, hearts pounding, and reached the girl just as the hunters realized what was happening. "Run!" Samuel shouted. He grabbed her arm, feeling the small bones of her wrist under his hand. The girl hesitated for only a second, then, sensing the urgency, bolted after them. The rocky terrain was dangerous, but fear gave them speed. Rocks and loose dirt slipped under their feet, and Samuel could hear the pounding hooves behind them. Eli swung a stick at one of the hunters, causing him to swerve and lose balance for a moment. The distraction was enough. They scrambled up a small incline, finding a hidden path that led away from the canyon. By the time the sun dipped completely behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they were safely out of sight. The girl collapsed to the ground, gasping, her small chest heaving. Samuel knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he said gently. Eli helped her to her feet, brushing dust from her torn dress. She looked at them with wide, uncertain eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Samuel smiled, though he could see the fear still lingering in her gaze. "Don't thank us yet. We need to get you somewhere safe." They led her back to their cabin, a modest structure of wood and stone surrounded by dry scrub and a few struggling fruit trees. Inside, they offered her water and the small amount of food they had left. She drank greedily, then ate in silence, her eyes darting nervously to the door. Samuel sat across from her and tried to put her at ease. "You're among friends," he said. "No one here will hurt you." Slowly, the tension in her shoulders eased, and she finally spoke a few words in English she had learned from travelers passing through. Her name was Nayeli. Over the next few days, Samuel and Eli worked to make her feel comfortable. They cleaned her wounds, gave her proper food, and even let her rest in a small bed by the fireplace. Though she spoke little, her intelligence and curiosity shone through. She watched them carefully, learning quickly how they lived and how they survived in a land that was often harsh and unforgiving. In turn, Samuel and Eli were amazed by her resilience. Despite everything she had endured, she held a quiet strength, a courage that went far beyond her years. The ranchers knew they couldn't keep her forever. Nayeli belonged with her people, and Samuel and Eli respected that. But the bond that formed in those first weeks would never be broken. She learned to trust them, and in return, she taught them about the land in ways they had never known, from the plants that could heal wounds to the signs that foretold rain. It was a silent understanding, a connection that didn't need many words. One night, as the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly over the desert, Nayeli spoke more openly. "I will never forget you," she said softly. Samuel and Eli exchanged a look, understanding the depth of her words. "Neither will we," Samuel replied. They knew that their lives had changed forever, not because of wealth or fame, but because they had done the right thing, simply by helping someone in need. By the time Nayeli was ready to return to her tribe, Samuel and Eli had prepared her for the journey. They gave her food for the road, a sturdy horse, and a promise. "If you ever need help, we'll be here." She nodded, tears in her eyes, knowing she would never forget these two poor ranchers who had risked everything to save her. As she rode off into the sunrise, Samuel and Eli watched in silence, the weight of their choices settling in their hearts. They didn't know what the future held, only that an act of courage, however small, could leave a mark that time could never erase. After Nayeli left, life on the ranch slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, but something in the air had changed. Samuel and Eli could no longer see the land as merely a place to work and survive. The memory of the girl, the way she had trusted them despite fear, the courage in her eyes, lingered in their minds like a persistent wind that refused to die down. Each evening, as they mended fences or guided their cattle, they would glance toward the horizon, half expecting to see her small figure emerging from the dust. The days turned into weeks and weeks into months, yet her presence remained vivid in their hearts. Samuel found himself thinking about Nayeli more than he realized. He remembered how she had watched the fire as if it were a living thing, eyes reflecting the orange glow like tiny flames. He remembered her questions, simple but curious about everything, from the tools they used to the stories they told of the land and the animals that roamed it. She had a sharp mind, quick to observe, and a quiet intelligence that impressed him. Eli noticed it too. "She's special," Eli said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills. "I don't think we've ever met anyone like her." Samuel nodded, the worry he felt for her now mingled with admiration. "I hope she's safe," he said softly. "I hope she remembers what we taught her." In the weeks that followed, Samuel and Eli continued their daily struggles. The drought made every task harder, and the ranch seemed smaller and lonelier without Nayeli. but her lesson stayed with them. Lessons about courage, patience, and the quiet strength found in the simplest acts of kindness. Samuel often found himself pausing during his work to consider the small signs of nature Nayeli had pointed out, like the way birds behaved before a storm or the subtle change in the wind that meant rain was coming. He had never noticed these things before, too caught up in survival to see the land's quiet messages. Eli, too, began to observe more carefully, learning from the girl even in her absence. One afternoon, months later, a rider appeared on the horizon, dust trailing behind him like a brown cloud. Samuel squinted against the sun and saw a familiar figure. Nayeli. She was older now, no longer the frightened girl they had rescued. Her movements were confident, her eyes sharp and purposeful. She rode straight to the ranch, dismounting gracefully when she arrived. Samuel and Eli ran to meet her, their hearts pounding with disbelief and joy. "Nayeli," Samuel called, voice breaking slightly. Eli clapped his hand on her shoulder. "You're back," Nayeli smiled, but there was a seriousness in her gaze that made Samuel pause. She had changed, not just in appearance but in presence. There was a weight to her that spoke of experience, of challenges faced and battles fought. "I came to see you," she said, her voice steady. "I wanted to thank you properly." She explained that she had returned to her tribe after leaving the ranch, learning their ways, mastering survival skills, and gradually becoming a respected figure among her people. The years had made her strong, but they had also taught her the value of loyalty and gratitude. For Samuel and Eli, the reunion was overwhelming. They listened intently as Nayeli recounted her journey, the hardships, the victories, and the moments of fear she had endured. She spoke of the harsh realities her tribe faced, the pressures from settlers, the fights for land, and the constant need to protect their families. Yet she never spoke with bitterness, only determination. Her words painted a picture of resilience, a life forged in adversity, and the courage to face the world on her own terms. The ranchers were amazed at how much she had grown. She had become not only strong but wise, carrying herself with a confidence that was both inspiring and humbling. Samuel, who had always been practical and cautious, felt a surge of pride. "You've done well, Nayeli," he said, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "Better than I ever imagined." Eli nodded, smiling broadly. "You've become everything we hoped you would be and more." Nayeli spent several weeks at the ranch, helping with the daily work and sharing stories of her people. She taught Samuel and Eli new techniques for tending the land, showing them how to find hidden water sources and identify plants that could be used for medicine. In return, they shared what they knew about ranching, showing her how to care for cattle and manage crops. The exchange was more than practical. It was a bond of respect and friendship, deepened by shared experience and trust. During this time, Nayeli also began to notice the challenges the ranchers faced from outside forces, land disputes with neighbors, threats from men who wanted to take advantage of their modest property, and the constant struggle against nature itself. She realized that the kindness Samuel and Eli had shown her years ago was part of a larger story of survival and resilience. And though she had returned to thank them, she began to consider how she could help them, using the strength and knowledge she had gained over the years. As the days passed, the bond between them strengthened. Nights were spent around the fire, sharing stories of the past and hopes for the future. Samuel often found himself reflecting on how a single act of courage, saving a young girl, had changed the course of so many lives. Nayeli, in turn, reflected on how that act had given her a chance to live, to grow, and to become someone who could make a difference. Their connection was quiet but powerful, rooted in gratitude, respect, and the understanding that true bravery often came from the simplest choices. One evening, as the desert sky turned deep blue and stars began to appear, Nayeli spoke softly, almost to herself. "I will never forget what you did for me," she said. Samuel looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. "And we will never forget you," he replied. Eli added, "You've taught us more than we could ever teach you." Naeli smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up her face. For a moment, the hardships of the past 20 years seemed to vanish, replaced by a quiet sense of hope and connection. But even as she stayed, the outside world was never far away. Rumors of land disputes, settlers moving in, and tensions with other communities reached their ears. Naeli realized that her journey was far from over, and that the lessons of courage and loyalty she had learned as a girl would soon be needed again. Samuel and Eli, though unaware of the challenges to come, trusted her wisdom and prepared to listen and follow if necessary. The stage was set for events that none of them could have imagined when they first met in that canyon years ago. By the time Naeli left the ranch to return to her people once more, the bond they shared was unbreakable. Samuel and Eli watched her disappear into the distance, but this time they did so with a new understanding. She was no longer the young girl who had needed their help. She was a leader, a protector, and someone who carried the spirit of courage they had seen in her all those years ago. And though the future remained uncertain, they felt a sense of peace, knowing that their small act of kindness had grown into something far greater than they could have imagined. The desert seemed quieter after her departure, but the lessons she left behind lingered. Samuel and Eli continued their work, guided by the wisdom Naeli had shared, and by the memory of a girl who had transformed from frightened child to fearless young woman. They had learned that bravery, loyalty, and gratitude were not just words. They were the threads that wove together lives, families, and communities. And somewhere out in the vast desert, Naeli carried their bond with her, ready to face whatever challenges awaited, knowing that those who had believed in her so long ago would always be a part of her story. The years that followed were filled with their usual struggles, but the ranch never felt quite so empty. Samuel and Eli often found themselves sharing stories of Naeli with visitors, emphasizing the lessons she had taught them about trust, courage, and compassion. They spoke of a young Apache girl who had shown them the true meaning of bravery, not through weapons or force, but through resilience, intelligence, and the ability to see hope even in the darkest moments. And though she was far away, living a life that now held responsibilities far beyond her years, they knew she carried the same lessons they had imparted. It was a quiet, patient kind of life, shaped by the land, by hardship, and by a bond that had survived years and distance. But deep down, Samuel and Eli felt the stirring of something greater, something they could not yet name. They sensed that the story of Naeli, the girl they had saved, was far from over, and that one day the courage they had witnessed and nurtured would come back to them in ways they could never have imagined. After Naeli rode off into the early morning sun, Samuel and Eli stood at the edge of their dusty field, watching her disappear into the horizon. The quiet of the desert felt heavier that day, as if the wind itself missed her presence. They returned to their work in silence, but the memory of her frightened eyes and her soft voice lingered like a shadow. Samuel threw a glance at the cabin, still half expecting to see her small figure running toward them. Eli shook his head and muttered, "She's gone, Sam, but I hope she's safe." Samuel said nothing, lost in thought. He could not shake the feeling that this small act of kindness, rescuing her, would ripple through time in ways he could not yet see. Days turned into weeks. The ranch returned to its usual rhythm, and life demanded their full attention. Water was scarce, and the summer sun baked the plains into a dusty gold. Samuel and Eli worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, herding cattle, and trying to coax enough feed from the parched soil. Yet, no matter how hard they worked, thoughts of Naeli crept in at unexpected moments. Samuel found himself remembering her small hands gripping the reins as they led her to safety, the determined look on her face despite her fear. He recalled the way she had asked questions about the land, the cattle, the sky, as if she wanted to understand every detail of their world. Eli, too, remembered her quiet courage and the spark of intelligence in her eyes. Over time, the ranchers realized that their lives had subtly changed because of her. Samuel began noticing things he had always ignored: the shape of clouds that hinted at rain, the smell of dry earth before a storm, the subtle signs that animals gave when danger was near. He remembered how Naeli had watched the land with sharp attention, and he found himself doing the same. Eli, normally practical and focused on survival, began to reflect on the kindness they had shown her. It was not just about saving a life, he realized, but about showing that trust and compassion could survive even in a harsh world. Months passed, and Samuel and Eli continued their quiet routines, but the memory of Naeli grew stronger rather than fading. Then one hot afternoon, a rider appeared on the horizon, a cloud of dust trailing behind him. Samuel squinted. The figure was moving fast, confidently, with a purpose that was immediately recognizable. As the rider drew closer, the realization hit them at the same moment. Naeli, she was returning. By the time she reached the ranch, Samuel and Eli were running toward her. Naeli had changed. She was taller, more confident, and there was a steady determination in her eyes that had not been there before. The girl who had once clutched at their hands in fear now stood tall, her posture commanding respect. "Naeli," Samuel called, his voice trembling. Eli clapped a hand on her shoulder. "It's really you, you've come back," she smiled, but it was a smile tempered with seriousness. "I've returned to thank you properly," she said, "and to show you that the lessons you taught me, they have not been forgotten." The ranchers listened as she spoke of her life after leaving the ranch, how she had returned to her tribe, learned their ways, grown stronger, and earned respect among her people. She told them of the hardships she had faced, the struggles to protect her family and community, and the courage she had been forced to find within herself. Samuel and Eli were amazed. They had saved her when she was small and helpless, never imagining the path she would take. Now she had become a capable and wise young woman, carrying the knowledge of both her people and the lessons they had given her. She spoke of the land with the same sharp attention she had shown as a girl, but now she spoke with authority. Samuel felt a swell of pride. "You've done well, Naeli," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Better than I ever imagined." Eli nodded, smiling broadly. "Yes, you've grown into someone truly remarkable." During her stay at the ranch, Naeli helped with daily work, her presence bringing a new energy to the land. She showed them how to find hidden water, identify plants that could heal wounds, and track subtle signs of changing weather. She also learned more about the ranch and the struggles Samuel and Eli faced, battles with the harsh land, with cattle thieves, and with neighbors who were quick to take advantage of those less fortunate. Each day spent together deepened the bond between them. It was not only an exchange of knowledge but of trust, respect, and shared experience. In the evenings they gathered around the fire, sharing stories. Naeli spoke of her travels, of the challenges she had faced, and the friends she had made. Samuel and Eli told her about the ranch, their childhoods, and the lessons they had learned about perseverance, honor, and living in harmony with the land. The firelight flickered across their faces as they laughed at memories and fell silent in contemplation. It was during these nights that Samuel realized something profound. The courage that had saved Naeli's life had returned to them in a new form, the gift of seeing the world through her eyes, the chance to learn and grow alongside her. Despite the joy of her presence, there was a quiet tension. Naeli was no longer a child, and her mind was aware of the dangers that surrounded them. She spoke of increasing tensions among local settlers, disputes over land, and the challenges her people faced as they sought to protect their homes. The ranchers listened carefully, realizing that their small world was part of a much larger picture, and that their act of kindness had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the ranch. Nayeli had learned to fight for what was right, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to value the bonds of loyalty and gratitude that had sustained her. One evening, as the desert sky turned deep shades of blue and purple, Nayeli spoke softly. "I have learned so much," she said, staring at the stars. "But the lessons I learned from you too, they are the ones I carry with me always." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "And we will never forget you," he said. Eli added with a grin, "You've taught us more than we ever taught you. You've shown us courage we didn't even know existed." Nayeli smiled, a genuine, bright smile that lit up her face. In that quiet moment, there was an understanding among them, a silent promise that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would remain connected. Weeks passed, and eventually, Nayeli prepared to return to her tribe. The ranchers felt the weight of her absence even before she left, but they were proud of the woman she had become. They helped her gather supplies for the journey, ensuring she had enough food, water, and tools to survive the long ride ahead. "If you ever need help," Samuel said, his voice firm, "we will be here." Nayeli nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. She mounted her horse, turned, and gave a final wave. The dusty trail swallowed her figure, and Samuel and Eli watched in silence, hearts full of hope and pride. After she disappeared into the horizon, the ranch felt emptier but richer at the same time. The lessons she had shared, about courage, observation, and resilience, remained. Samuel and Eli worked harder, guided by the wisdom Nayeli had brought with her. They shared stories of her with visitors and neighbors, speaking of a young girl whose bravery had changed their lives. The bond they shared with her was invisible but unbreakable, a quiet thread running through the fabric of their days. Even as the years passed, the memory of Nayeli and her visit stayed vivid. Samuel and Eli often looked toward the horizon, wondering how she was doing, what challenges she faced, and whether the lessons they had given her were helping her navigate the world. And somewhere out in the vast desert, Nayeli carried those lessons with her, walking through life with courage, intelligence, and the knowledge that the kindness of two strangers had given her a chance to become the person she was meant to be. Though the land around them remained harsh and unforgiving, Samuel and Eli felt a quiet hope. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place where lives had intertwined, where courage had been nurtured, and where gratitude had created a bond that would endure for decades. The story of Nayeli, the girl they had saved, had become part of their own lives, shaping the way they lived, the choices they made, and the way they saw the world. And deep in their hearts, they sensed that the story was far from over. Years passed since Nayeli had last visited the ranch. Samuel and Eli continued their quiet, hard-working lives, tending to cattle and repairing fences, yet her presence was never far from their thoughts. The lessons she had shared, the courage she had shown, and the gratitude she carried had left a lasting impression on them. They would often sit in the evenings, staring at the horizon, imagining where she might be and what challenges she faced. The desert, vast and unchanging, seemed to hold her memory like a quiet whisper in the wind. Meanwhile, Nayeli had grown into a strong, capable woman. Living among her people, she learned the ways of her tribe, mastering skills that would allow her to protect herself and others. She learned to track animals, to hunt efficiently, and to navigate the rough terrain of the desert. She learned the value of patience, observation, and planning. Her natural intelligence, combined with the lessons from Samuel and Eli, allowed her to grow into a leader respected by all who knew her. She was no longer the frightened child who had once run for her life. She was a strategist, a protector, and a voice of reason in her community. The years were not easy. Her tribe faced constant pressure from settlers encroaching on their lands, and conflicts with neighboring groups occasionally threatened the fragile peace they had worked to maintain. Nayeli took these challenges seriously. She studied the ways of negotiation and defense, learning not only to fight but to think ahead, to anticipate problems before they arose. She remembered the courage and kindness Samuel and Eli had shown her, and she carried it with her as a guiding principle. Strength was important, but so was compassion and loyalty. In her late 20s, Nayeli began to take on responsibilities that required leadership. She mediated disputes within her tribe, helped plan strategies to protect the lands they depended upon, and trained younger members to defend themselves while respecting the lives of others. Her influence grew steadily, and she became known not just for her strength but for her fairness and wisdom. People looked to her for guidance, trusting her judgment even in difficult circumstances. It was a far cry from the frightened girl who had once hidden in the canyon, yet she never forgot the lessons of courage and trust that had been shown to her. One day, word reached her of growing threats from outsiders trying to seize lands near the ranch where Samuel and Eli lived. Rumors spoke of men who were unscrupulous, willing to take property by force and ignore the lives of those who opposed them. Nayeli listened carefully, her mind working quickly. She remembered the kindness of the two ranchers who had saved her so many years ago. They had acted without hesitation when danger threatened her, showing her that helping others was a virtue worth protecting. She realized that her debt to them was not just personal, it was a responsibility to act when she could. She began gathering a small group of trusted warriors from her tribe, training them not only in physical skills but in strategy and discipline. Nayeli wanted to ensure that when the time came, they could act decisively, yet without unnecessary violence. She emphasized loyalty, courage, and respect for life in every lesson she gave. Her army was small at first, but it grew steadily as more people joined her cause, inspired by her leadership and the values she embodied. She did not seek power for herself, but rather the means to protect those who could not defend themselves, and to honor the memory of the kindness she had received. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Samuel and Eli continued their lives unaware of the gathering storm. They faced the usual hardships of the land: droughts, unpredictable weather, and occasional disputes with neighbors, but nothing had prepared them for what was coming. Life on the frontier had always been unpredictable, yet it had taught them resilience, patience, and the ability to face challenges with calm determination. Still, they would soon find that even the best prepared lives could be touched by forces beyond imagination. In the meantime, Nayeli's reputation as a leader spread. Neighboring tribes and communities respected her counsel, and even some settlers began to hear stories of a woman whose bravery and intelligence were unmatched. She was admired not for her strength alone, but for the fairness and loyalty she displayed in every decision. She had become a symbol of hope for her people, someone who could be relied upon to act wisely, protect those in need, and honor the bonds of gratitude and trust that were often forgotten in a harsh world. As the years passed, Nayeli continued to prepare. She trained in every aspect of leadership, observing enemy movements, planning defenses, teaching negotiation skills, and learning to inspire loyalty among her people. Every day, she carried with her the lessons from Samuel and Eli: patience, courage, and the understanding that true strength involved more than physical power. She studied maps of the surrounding lands, noting possible threats and routes that could be used to protect communities. Her mind was sharp, and her heart was guided by the gratitude she had never forgotten. One quiet evening, while resting near a river that ran through the desert, Nayeli reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the canyon, the day Samuel and Eli had saved her, and the warmth of their small cabin. She realized that without that single act of courage, she might never have survived, never have learned to become the leader she was now. The thought strengthened her resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them not for herself, but to honor the kindness she had been shown and to protect those who could not protect themselves. Then came the day when Nayeli decided it was time to act. Reports had reached her of increasing threats to the rancher's land, of men who intended to seize it by force. She knew that Samuel and Eli, now older and less able to fight, would be in great danger. Gathering her trained warriors, she devised a careful plan, not to attack recklessly but to arrive with strength, strategy, and precision. Her goal was to protect, not to seek vengeance. The army she had built was disciplined, loyal, and prepared to follow her guidance without question. Before setting out, Naeli addressed her warriors. "We go not to conquer," she said, her voice steady, "but to protect those who once showed us kindness. We fight with honor for courage and loyalty. We remember that strength is nothing without respect for life." Her warriors listened intently, inspired by her words. They had trained under her leadership for years, and they trusted her completely. They knew her intelligence, her fairness, and her unwavering commitment to justice. When she gave the signal, they would act swiftly, efficiently, and decisively. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Samuel and Eli continued their daily work, unaware of the forces gathering for their protection. They had long given up expecting surprises, but the quiet tension in the land, the small signs of distant travelers, and the whispers of change in the community would soon alert them to something extraordinary. They had always lived with uncertainty, relying on courage, skill, and determination to survive, but even they could not imagine the scope of what was approaching. As the sun began to rise over the horizon one morning, dust clouds appeared in the distance. Samuel and Eli squinted, uncertain at first. The figures grew larger, moving with purpose and coordination. Naeli rode at the front, her posture calm but commanding, leading a formidable group of warriors behind her. The ranchers' hearts raced. At first, they wondered if danger had come at last, but then they saw her face, the same young girl they had once saved, now a powerful and confident woman. Recognition and disbelief filled them as Naeli rode forward. The moment was filled with emotion. Naeli had returned, not as a frightened child, but as a leader, bringing strength, strategy, and protection to those who had once shown her kindness. Samuel and Eli realized that the years of preparation, the lessons she had learned, and the loyalty she had inspired had all led to this moment. The ranch, their home, and the land they had fought to protect would not face this threat alone. Naeli's army had come not to conquer, but to honor the courage that had once been shown to her, and to defend those who had done good in a world that often overlooked kindness. The morning air was crisp as the dust clouds on the horizon drew nearer. Samuel and Eli were in the field, mending a fence that had been damaged by the summer wind, when Eli squinted toward the distance. "Sam, do you see that?" he asked, shading his eyes against the rising sun. At first, Samuel thought it was just another band of travelers or perhaps a small herd of cattle, but as the shapes grew clearer, his stomach tightened. There were dozens of riders, moving with discipline and purpose, not the random chaos of ordinary travelers. He dropped the fence post he had been holding and ran toward Eli. I think it's her." As the riders drew closer, Samuel's heart leapt in disbelief. Leading them was Naeli. She rode at the front with the confidence and authority of someone born to command. Behind her, the warriors moved as one, silent but coordinated, their eyes alert, their hands ready but relaxed. The two ranchers felt a mixture of awe, relief, and worry. The girl they had saved 20 years ago had returned, not timid or frightened, but strong, capable, and commanding an army to protect them. Naeli's eyes met theirs as she approached. There was no fear in her gaze, only determination and warmth. She dismounted smoothly, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust as she walked toward them. Samuel and Eli ran to meet her, their hearts pounding. "Naeli!" Samuel shouted, his voice breaking with emotion. Eli followed close behind, clapping his hands in disbelief. "We can't believe it, you're here." Naeli smiled, but it was a serious smile, one that held the weight of years of preparation. "I promised I would never forget," she said, her voice steady. "And I never did. I learned much in the years since you saved me. Now it is my turn to help you." She gestured behind her, and Samuel and Eli finally noticed the scale of what she had brought. A disciplined group of warriors, armed but careful, trained in defense, ready to act, yet respectful of life. The ranchers felt a wave of gratitude and awe. The threat they faced was not imaginary. A wealthy land baron from the neighboring valley had been trying to force Samuel and Eli off their land for months. He sent men to intimidate them, to steal their cattle, and to take what little water and resources they had. Until now, the ranchers had relied on their own skills and endurance, but they knew they could not withstand the baron's relentless pressure alone. Naeli's return changed everything. She had come prepared, not only with warriors but with plans, strategy, and the wisdom she had gained over 2 decades. The first order of business was to secure the ranch. Naeli guided the warriors to positions around the perimeter, using natural features like ridges, trees, and small hills as cover. She instructed Samuel and Eli on how to strengthen the fences, set alarms, and create safe areas for the cattle. The ranchers watched in awe as the woman they had once saved directed everyone with precision and confidence. Her leadership was quiet but firm, instilling order without fear, and the workers and warriors responded with respect and energy. Over the next few days, Naeli and her warriors trained Samuel, Eli, and the local helpers. They practiced strategies for defense, ways to spot intruders before they arrived, and methods to protect livestock and property. Naeli emphasized caution, communication, and intelligence over brute force. She knew the baron's men were not invincible, but they were dangerous, and careful planning was essential. Samuel marveled at her knowledge, recalling the little girl who had once clung to him in the canyon. The transformation was almost unbelievable. During this time, the ranchers and Naeli shared stories of the past. Naeli told them of her travels, the trials she had faced, and the lessons she had learned from leading her people. Samuel and Eli shared their own struggles, the difficulties of keeping the ranch alive, and the small victories that had kept them going. Around the fire in the evenings, laughter mingled with serious conversation. Despite the looming threat, there was a sense of hope and solidarity that filled the ranch in a way it never had before. The bond between them was stronger than ever, built on decades of trust, gratitude, and shared experience. The baron's men were clever, and they tried to approach quietly at first, testing the defenses of the ranch. Naeli had anticipated this. Scouts hidden in the hills reported every movement, and the ranchers were ready. When a small group of men attempted to sneak in under the cover of night, Naeli's warriors intercepted them quickly but without unnecessary harm. They captured the intruders, tied them securely, and brought them to Samuel and Eli. Naeli turned to the ranchers. "We do not wish to harm anyone unless absolutely necessary," she said. "We protect, but we do not seek revenge." Samuel and Eli nodded, proud and astonished at her balance of strength and compassion. News soon spread that Naeli had returned, leading a disciplined group of warriors to protect those in need. The community around the ranch began to rally, offering support and assistance. Neighbors who had once been cautious or distant now approached with respect, inspired by the courage and loyalty that Naeli embodied. Samuel and Eli could barely keep up with the influx of people seeking guidance, but with Naeli's leadership, they felt secure. The ranch had become more than a home. It was now a symbol of courage, unity, and justice. The final confrontation with the baron's men was inevitable. Naeli had anticipated it for weeks, preparing plans, positions, and contingencies. When the group arrived in force, confident in their power, they were met not with chaos but with precise, coordinated resistance. Naeli had positioned her warriors strategically, using the natural terrain to their advantage. Samuel and Eli, though older, worked alongside them, following her instructions and contributing their knowledge of the land. The battle was brief but effective. The Baron's men were overwhelmed by the organization and discipline of Naeli's group, and they quickly realized that force alone would not succeed. When the confrontation ended, the ranch was safe. The Baron's men had been defeated without unnecessary violence, their greed exposed, and their attempts to take the land ended. Samuel and Eli could hardly believe what had been accomplished. Naeli, however, remained composed. She had trained and prepared her people to protect without cruelty, to act decisively but honorably. Her leadership had ensured that the ranch and the surrounding community were safe, and that justice had been served without unnecessary bloodshed. After the threat passed, life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Naeli stayed for a time, helping to organize resources, train workers, and strengthen the community. Samuel and Eli were grateful beyond words. They had never imagined that the small act of saving a frightened girl in a canyon would lead to such extraordinary events. Yet, looking at Naeli, watching her guide and protect everyone with intelligence and compassion, they understood how much power kindness could generate. The bond between the ranchers and Naeli grew even stronger. Nights around the fire were filled with stories, laughter, and reflection. Samuel often marveled at the journey Naeli had taken, from a frightened girl to a wise and fearless leader. Eli nodded in agreement. "She's remarkable," he said quietly, "and we had the honor of helping her start it." Naeli listened and smiled. She did not seek praise, only the quiet satisfaction that she had honored the courage and trust that had once been shown to her. The community began to view the ranch not just as a home or a business, but as a place of protection, unity, and justice. Naeli's influence extended beyond the boundaries of the property, inspiring others to act with courage and integrity. Samuel and Eli realized that their simple act of kindness had grown into something far greater than they could have imagined. It had created ripples that changed not only Naeli's life, but the lives of everyone around them. As the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows across the fields, Samuel and Eli looked at Naeli with gratitude and admiration. She had returned to repay the debt of kindness they had shown her, but she had done so with wisdom, honor, and compassion. Their hearts were full, knowing that the ranch, their home, and their lives were safe, thanks to the courage of a girl they had once rescued, a girl who had grown into a remarkable woman, capable of leading and protecting others with strength and integrity. The dust settled, the community thrived, and the story of Naeli's return spread far and wide. Samuel and Eli often told visitors about the girl they had saved, the lessons of courage and trust they had learned, and the extraordinary events that followed. Yet despite the recognition, Naeli remained humble, focusing on the work that still needed to be done, teaching, protecting, and inspiring those around her. Life at the ranch continued, stronger and safer than ever, but the memory of what had happened lingered as a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and loyalty. The two ranchers knew that they had played a small part in shaping a remarkable life, and they cherished the knowledge that their choices had made a lasting impact. Naeli had returned with an army, but it was not the army alone that had protected the ranch. It was the bond of trust, gratitude, and courage that had been built years before in a small canyon, between two poor ranchers and a frightened girl who would one day change everything. After the threat from the land Baron's men was over, life at the ranch slowly settled into a new rhythm. Samuel and Eli worked alongside Naeli and her warriors, tending to the fields, repairing fences, and caring for the cattle. The ranch had been strengthened, not only physically with improved fences and watchpoints, but also in spirit. There was a sense of security and unity that had never been present before. The community had grown closer, and even neighboring ranchers who had once viewed Samuel and Eli with envy or suspicion now came to them for guidance and friendship. Naeli stayed for several weeks, helping everyone adjust to this new life. She taught the ranchers and their neighbors how to read the land, how to plan for droughts, and how to protect themselves and their families without resorting to unnecessary force. She emphasized careful observation, planning, and communication, showing that strength was most effective when paired with intelligence and foresight. Samuel and Eli were amazed at how much knowledge she had gained over the years, both from her people and from her own experiences. Every day, they learned something new, and every evening they gathered around the fire to share stories, laughter, and lessons. Despite the calm, there was a quiet awareness that the world outside the ranch remained unpredictable. Settlers continued to move into the area, some with good intentions and others with greed in their hearts. Naomi knew that protection could not last forever, and that part of her responsibility was to prepare others to carry forward the lessons she had taught. She began training younger members of the community, teaching them not only how to defend the land but also how to act with honor, fairness, and courage. The younger generation looked up to her with admiration, inspired by her story and the way she led with both strength and kindness. Samuel and Eli often watched Naomi as she moved among the workers and warriors, guiding them with a quiet authority that demanded respect without fear. Samuel thought about the day they had first rescued her, remembering how small and frightened she had been. Now she commanded an army and led with wisdom that far surpassed anything they could have imagined. "Who would have thought," Samuel said one evening as they repaired a fence, "that the little girl in the canyon would grow into someone like her?" Eli smiled, shaking his head. "It's more than we could have ever hoped. She's remarkable, and she'll always carry a part of us with her." During her time at the ranch, Naomi took a particular interest in ensuring that Samuel and Eli were cared for. She arranged for better irrigation for their crops, taught them more efficient methods for managing their cattle, and helped them organize their supplies for the coming months. Her presence brought not only protection but also a sense of hope and renewal. The ranch, once a place of struggle and isolation, had become a symbol of community, resilience, and mutual respect. The bond formed through years of trust and gratitude had grown into something that could withstand any challenge. One day, Naomi gathered the entire community in the main yard of the ranch. She spoke with quiet strength, her voice carrying across the gathering. "We have faced threats and challenges," she began, "and we have overcome them together. Remember that courage, loyalty, and kindness are stronger than any weapon. Protect what is right, help those in need, and always act with honor. The bonds we build with others are what truly make us strong." The crowd listened intently, inspired by her words. Samuel and Eli felt a deep sense of pride. The young girl they had saved years ago had not only protected them, but had taught an entire community the value of courage, wisdom, and compassion. As the weeks passed, Naomi prepared to return to her tribe. She knew that her responsibilities there were still many, and that her people needed her guidance. Yet, she left behind a community that was stronger, safer, and more united than she had found it. Samuel and Eli helped her gather her belongings and bid her farewell. The ranchers had learned that true gratitude is not measured in words alone, but in actions that honor the bond between people. Naomi had returned to repay a debt, but in doing so, she had created a legacy that would endure long after she left. Before she departed, Naomi took Samuel and Eli aside. "I will always carry your kindness with me," she said. "Because of you, I learned what it means to trust, to have courage, and to act with compassion. You changed my life, and now your example will continue to inspire others." Samuel, his eyes glistening, grasped her hand. "And you have changed ours," he replied. Eli nodded in agreement. "You taught us that bravery is not about strength alone, but about helping others when they need it most." Naomi smiled, a warmth in her eyes that spoke of gratitude, respect, and deep connection. As Naomi rode off with her warriors, the ranchers watched her silhouette disappear into the distance, the dust rising behind her like a trail of memory and promise. The land felt quieter without her presence, but the lessons she had left behind resonated in every corner. Samuel and Eli worked with renewed energy, caring for the ranch, their community, and each other. The spirit of courage, loyalty, and gratitude that had been nurtured in them and in Naeli now flowed through the entire valley. Over the following years, the story of Naeli's return became a legend in the region. Travelers, settlers, and neighboring tribes spoke of the woman who had once been a frightened girl and returned as a fearless leader. They told of how she had protected a small ranch, guided by courage, intelligence, and honor, and how the kindness of two poor ranchers had started a chain of events that changed the lives of many. Samuel and Eli were often approached by people who wanted to hear the story firsthand, and they shared it humbly, emphasizing the power of simple acts of kindness and the importance of trust and loyalty. Life at the ranch continued, but it was never the same as before. Samuel and Eli had grown older, their steps slower, their hands worn by years of labor. Yet their spirits were stronger, their hearts fuller, and their lives richer because of the bond they had shared with Naeli. They understood that life's greatest impact often comes from small, selfless acts that ripple far beyond what one can see. The girl they had saved had grown into a leader, protector, and symbol of hope, not because of wealth or power, but because of courage, wisdom, and gratitude. Even as Naeli returned to her people and continued her life of leadership, the connection between her and the ranchers remained unbroken. Letters and messages were exchanged, news traveled, and every success she achieved was shared with Samuel and Eli. They celebrated her victories quietly but with pride, knowing that the kindness they had shown decades ago had created a ripple of change far greater than they could have imagined. The land, the community, and the people around the ranch thrived, strengthened by the courage and wisdom of a girl who had learned the meaning of gratitude and loyalty. In the twilight of their years, Samuel and Eli often sat on the porch, looking out across the fields they had tended for decades. The wind carried the scent of the desert, the warmth of the sun painted the hills, and the quiet strength of the land was a reminder of everything they had endured and achieved. They remembered the day they had found Naeli in the canyon, the courage it had taken to help her, and the incredible journey that followed. And they knew, deep in their hearts, that the act of saving a frightened girl had changed the course of many lives, including their own. The ranch became a place of memory, honor, and inspiration. Visitors, neighbors, and new generations of settlers heard the story of the girl who returned with an army, and they learned a valuable lesson: that courage, kindness, and loyalty are forces more powerful than fear, greed, or violence. Samuel and Eli had lived humble lives, but through one small act, they had made a lasting difference, and their story, intertwined with Naeli's, would continue to inspire people for generations. As the sun set one final time over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Samuel and Eli stood together, silently watching the horizon. Somewhere out there, Naeli rode with her warriors, carrying the lessons of trust, courage, and gratitude that had been passed down to her. The ranch was safe, the community was stronger, and the legacy of a simple act of kindness had reached far beyond the imagination of anyone involved. In that moment, the two men understood something profound. Life is not measured only by what we do for ourselves, but by the ways we help others, the courage we show, and the love and trust we nurture. The story of the ranch, the two poor men, and the girl who returned with an army became a legend told across the valley, a tale of bravery, wisdom, and the enduring power of kindness. And though years would pass, the lessons lived on, reminding everyone that even the smallest act of courage can change the course of history, create bonds that endure for a lifetime, and inspire generations yet to come.